So here's something I want you to think about. How do some people go from, they're in school and they're in special ed and they don't have the reading skills, they don't have the math skills that others do, so they have to go and they have to get special help with that. How do some people sit in those classes and then go out into the world and really have amazing jobs, amazing relationships, and actually do better than a lot of the kids that get great grades? How does that even happen? Well, I'm going to tell you a couple stories today, and I'm going to tell you they leaned into their strengths, and that's what I want you to do. Welcome to the next 24 hours, where I'm going to give you real information you can really use to transform your life and work one day at a time. I'll be your host, Curtis Zimmerman. I was recently speaking at a conference for educators, and it brought me full circle to some of the things that they were sharing with me, and it made me really want to talk a little bit about how do people go from special ed. As a kid, I have dyslexia. We moved a lot. I had a very disruptive household that I lived in. And so my entire career as a student, I was in special ed. I was in those special classes. And some of the takeaways from other students that was amazing to me, I wanted to share, because what they did was they leaned into their strengths. And oftentimes we are so gifted in so many things that we can't make a choice on what we want to do with our life. We can't make a choice on what we want our major to be. We can't make a choice. And that's because we have so many gifts. And sometimes it's funny to me because I know for fact when you don't have many gifts, maybe one or two to pick from, and that's all you're passionate about, it's funny how you can take that and really build a life that you want and build a life that you didn't expect and nobody around you did. So I want to encourage you today to think about that and think about what if you just focus on the things you really love. So one of the people that I met while I was in high school was a young man that wasn't very social. I think I probably heard him say 10 words my whole year that we were in class together. He kept to himself. Nobody forced him to do much of anything. Basically, in high school, the special ed class was kind of babysitting. I have to be honest with you. The special ed teacher was actually the football coach. And what would happen was the football coach would come, and he'd say, okay, everybody sit down at your desk and be quiet and read or do whatever you want to do. And then he'd call in a player or two, and they would sit and go over plays. And we were kind of left on our own to do whatever we wanted. That happened day in and day out during the special ed classes that I had. So one of the other students would sit hour after hour, and he would just draw. And he made these amazing drawings, and I was in awe and wonderment looking at how talented he was. And he would start, and he'd have a piece of paper, and by the time the class was over, he'd have a beautiful piece of artwork. It was amazing. And really, to be honest with you, nobody paid much attention to it. I don't think anyone in his family paid much attention to it. I know for a fact that no one at the school looked at it, recognized it, and said, hey, we should put this in an art fair, or we should take this and submit it for you to go. And never happened. He just kind of kept it to himself, and I don't know how many people he even shared it with. But the interesting part of the story is that I found out because about a year later, after he graduated, he came by the school and he was in a brand new car, and he had amazing clothes on. And this was in Lawndale, California, where, believe me, people didn't have amazing cars and had amazing clothes, not the school I went to. And he came back into the special ed class, and he was talking with a few people then, and he was talking about his journey. And his journey was, for some reason, somebody found out about his artwork. And it went to a company called Northrop. And why was Northrop interested in this young special ed student? And believe me, this kid was not gifted in many other things. So I was reading, writing, arithmetic. That wasn't his thing. But what they found out is not only could he draw amazingly, not only were his pieces of art like amazing to look at, but he actually drew to scale. And back then, this is before like all the modern technology we have now, that means he was able to look at a car from his memory, he'd see it once, and then from his memory, he could draw the car, and the wheels compared to the windshield, compared to the bumper, it was all perfect as far as the scale of what it should be. So it was like a 3D in his head of what it looked like, and then he was able to put that on paper. So they did hire him, paid him lots of money, and then they would take him in a plane and fly him over places like Russia, where they had planes that they didn't know what the planes were, and he could see them once and then go back and he could draw those to scale. And they used that information to help them with their designs or to better understand the designs of the other planes. How true this was or not, I have to be honest with you, I only had the one interaction with him, but it was a real car he was driving, and he did have an ID that said Northrop on it, and I know he wasn't there because he was a rocket scientist, so I know that for whatever it was worth, there was something he was using his drawing for them to take Northrop to the next level. That's leaning into your strengths. And nobody ever saw that in him. I don't know that he saw it in himself. But he spent hours upon hours upon hours doing what he loved, which was drawing and then sharing that apparently with other people. That is what I want you to think about with these stories. The next one's even more interesting because this is junior high. And again, it's junior high. And well, a lot of different people in special ed when I was in junior high, there were gang members. You know, they came to school like 13 days out of the year. And there were people that were just kind of, probably going to punch somebody in the face that week. So these were the problem children. And then there were those that were like me. They moved a lot. They had some kind of learning kind of problems like dyslexia or, there's a million labels. I try not to label things. But this particular person I want to tell you about, I think he came to school that year probably, 25 days. And it was because his family life wasn't great. And it was because he literally would just ditch school. And what was he doing when he was doing drugs? Was he going and getting alcohol? No, he was taking his skateboard and he was going and practicing on a skateboard. And he was in special ed because of lots of different things, but his passion, all he wanted to do all day, every day, on the weekends, all summer, was practice on a skateboard. And I'll never forget how it was kind of looked down upon, and skateboarding was, you're going to destroy property, and it had this whole stigma to it when I was growing up. And I fast forward now, it's about 3.5 years later, and I was working at Marineland. Marineland's an aquatic park like SeaWorld, and I was a mime, and I used to open for the Killawell show, and I had, I'd roam around as a performer and things like that. I worked there for several years. And this one summer, for 3 weekends, there was this touring show that was set up in the parking lot at Marineland. And what it was a skateboarding exhibition. And they had like Vans and other huge brands that would take this and it would travel all around the country. And it was skateboarders. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. So on my break, I went and I watched the show. And sure enough, there was that young man that was in special ed with me that was so obsessed with skateboarding. And he was probably, 16 by then. And when the show was over, I watched him. He was amazing. What he could do with his skateboard was unbelievable. Got a standing ovation from the crowd that day. And afterwards, I went up and, he knew that I was a performer and we started talking. And he was telling me about his journey, how he didn't excel in school, his family life wasn't great, and his passion was skateboarding, and his passion was doing tricks and inventing tricks no one's ever done before. And he was at the beach practicing, and somebody from some brand or somebody from some skateboard team saw him and immediately said, hey man, we want you to come and travel with us. And he'd been traveling the whole United States now, performing and making more money than his parents. He said that and his face just like lit up. And, and I'm traveling the country and I'm doing this all day and I'm with great skateboarders and I make more money than my parents do now. Why am I sharing these stories? because these stories hit home for me. These were real people that in the time were looked down upon. That the whole society of the classroom, the whole structure thought they were a piece of crap. I'm telling you right now, I lived in those classrooms for years, my whole life. I can't tell you how many times I got F's on my report card and I felt like a horrible human being because I wore that as my identity. And then the day came where I realized that's not my identity. I am gifted in certain things, and I need to spend my time on the juggling and on the magic and on the mime skills, and I need to go and share that with other people. And that's what they did. And if you know somebody who's struggling right now, if you know somebody who's not a whiz kid in school, it doesn't mean that he or she doesn't have awesome gifts. It means that we might be focusing on the wrong things. We might be asking them to do things that aren't their strength. So help them to say, look, here's a story about other people that had challenges. Here are some stories where people leaned in what they were really, really good at. And before you know it, the world saw those things and appreciated them for what they were. And I want you to think about yourself right now. When you were growing up, what were the things you loved? What were, right now, if you won the lottery and tomorrow you could do this for the rest of your life and you wouldn't have to make money for it and you didn't have to impress anybody, it's just because what you enjoyed, and also that allowed you to make the money that you wanted, because that's what I find over and over. Those people that get passionate and spend the time and energy to put into what they really love, the money comes. But I see too many people give that up for mediocrity. Give that up so that they can move into my subdivision 3 years earlier. Listen, I'd rather have you wait 10 years before you get to move into my subdivision, but when you do, you love your job, you love your life, you're passionate about what you can do every day. Rather than giving all that up so that you get the degree and you get the job and you get the money to move in, but you hate your life, you hate your kids, your wife wants a divorce, and you don't like who you are as a person because you're not doing what you were put on the planet to do. That might sound harsh, but I've seen it too many times. So I share those stories because they're real and I see their faces when I talk about it. And tomorrow, when you look in the mirror and you see your face, I want you to think about what's going to make you excited. What's going to make the next 24 hours amazing for you? But more importantly, if you do it consistently, what will the next 24 years look like? It's so funny because as I think about the podcast and why I wanted to do a podcast and the stories I wanted to tell, these were two stories I was really passionate about. And I want to make it clear that I know that this doesn't apply to everyone listening. I know that most people that are listening have lots of gifts and have lots of things that they're good at, and they have lots of options in their life. But I wanted to make it clear that if you know somebody who's been diagnosed with a learning disability or whatever that looks like, I want you to just see it differently from now on. I want you to see their situation potentially as a fresh hire that you might hire. If there's some kid, if there's some young lady that is so passionate about editing and all they do all day is sit in front of a computer and edit, and they dropped out of school and it's crazy, but that's what they love, and then you need an editor, don't worry about all that other backstory. Look at what they're amazing at. Hire them for what it is. And I'm telling you, you're going to be amazed at the kind of quality that you get from those kinds of people. It's interesting for me because I became a mime and a juggler and a fire eater and a magician, not because I was so gifted in math and science and everything else and getting straight A's and I was on the dean's list. I did all those things because I wasn't good at anything else. I did those things because I loved them, and it was the only thing I was good at. And sure enough, it turned into a career and had me travel the world and see places that I know lots of people that you would think are really smart never had the opportunity to go and see and experience. So for yourself, apply it, or look at some of the people around you maybe a little bit differently and encourage them to lean into their gifts. All right, well, it's time for the 24-hour challenge. I'm so excited because this is one of those things where you get to be actually involved in helping somebody else share their gifts. I want you to think about that young kid on the skateboard. Somebody saw him and went, wow, that's crazy. That kid's really talented. Somebody saw the kid kind of slouched over drawing in his sketch pad and said, let me take a look at that, and looked at it closely. I want you to think about someone in your world right now that has a gift, that has a skill, and I want you to look at it for what it is. Don't look at everything else that they're not doing or what they can't do. Look at specifically what that is. I want you to take a picture of it. I want you to share it on your social media and just say how amazing this one thing is, and I had to share it with everyone that I care about. Do that in the next 24 hours, and you might be amazed at the ripple effects in their life. Hey, thank you for listening to the next 24 hours. It would mean a lot to me if you found this content today valuable, that you share it with your friends. Leave me a review. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to learn more about what I do, it's really simple. Just go to curtiszimmerman.com. Remember, in order to live the dream, you have to make the next 24 hours count. The clock is ticking.